Cool, cool. Thanks for joining me.
Yeah, it's a pleasure.
Yeah, cool, cool. Um, would you mind if I ask where are you calling us from?
So right now I'm in Seattle, Washington.
Okay, is that where you live?
I just moved there a couple months ago.
Oh, did you?
Yep.
And what brought you there?
Work actually work I found through Twitter.
Oh, really? No, no way.
Yeah.
What do you mind if I inquire more about that, or is it private?
I can't say too much about it yet, but basically we're doing kind of like a stealth startup, and we'll be launching something in the next couple months, and I'll tell you more about that later.
Okay, cool. I was gonna ask you, like, are you? I wasn't sure what you did for a living. I kind of got the impression that you're kind of an entrepreneur or something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, is that fair to say? Do you just do like different startups and bounce around?
Um, kind of. So basically, what happened was like I basically dropped out of university. I said, "This is all bullshit. Let me just go read some books, hide away in the middle of nowhere, just read a lot of books." And then I started to read about all these different topics. And then people in the area said they were interested in you helping us with our startup. And so I just kind of like consulted for different startups, and then I started to just like shit post on Twitter, and then somebody in Seattle found me, says, "Hey, we want you to come over here and help us with this." So I came over here.
Could you just turn up your microphone? Some people are saying they can't hear you.
Wait, how do I turn it up? I don't even know how. Like I'm just using
Um,
the default.
there should be a setting on the Google Hangout screen. If you go
Let me
into
see.
settings,
Uh, Settings. Hold up. I don't even see an option.
or maybe you can do your microphone on your computer. Just turn up the sensitivity.
Let's see.
Oh, Jacob says I might have to do it. Let me see. No, I think that's on you. If you hover over the screen, you there should be an option like a gear icon.
Yeah.
And does that let you make your microphone more sensitive or anything? Oh, let me see.
Um, on my computer it says it's at full volume.
Okay,
So
one sec. Let me see. Let me see what I can do. Oh, yeah, Jacob is right. I can do it from here. All right, one sec. Sorry. Okay, that should be louder for everyone.
is it louder?
Yeah, hang on. All right, everyone should be able to hear Mimetic louder now. If people want me to turn his mic up a little bit more, I can do that. Just type in the chat, but it should be a little bit louder now. So for anyone who maybe wasn't hearing because the volume was down, by the way, what should I call you?
People just call me Q, letter Q, because they can't really pronounce my full name.
Okay, Q. That's cool. I like that. It's mysterious.
Yeah.
What Q was just saying for anyone who couldn't hear him because his mic was down or the whatever the hangout was down. Yeah, so you're basically saying that um, you basically started shit posting on Twitter and it got you a job in Seattle.
Yeah, pretty much.
That's interesting. Do you think that's like a repeatable method that people can use? Like, do you think in general, like if you're very intelligent and you have good insights, if you start shit posting aggressively on Twitter, will it eventually get you hired, or is that not a reliable thing to do?
I don't know if it's reliable, but I do think it's repeatable because I know somebody else who's also done that.
Really
Yeah.
interesting. Interesting. Okay, cool. So maybe we could just jump right into what is your idea about mimetic value? You have as far as I can tell, you have a kind of overarching philosophy that you're developing or working on related to how we can take ideas about mimesis, if I understand correctly, and basically leverage them for kind of intelligent social action. Could you tell us more about it?
Yeah, yeah. So let's see. So I haven't actually been focusing on this topic in the past couple weeks, but basically, what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to look at just all these different disciplines and try to see how do I practically apply them in business and also in my own life. And basically, like I guess what I started with is Warren Buffett and Charlie Munger. They had this, and there's also this Farnham Street blog. That guy, he always talks about these lattices of mental models. So I basically just read up on topics I'm interested in. I try to connect them, and basically another one of my influences was Tim Ferriss, and I looked at one of his books. It's called Tools of Titans, and at the back of the book, basically he listed out all the top recommended books of the guests he had, and I just looked through that list and tried to find what are the most interesting books that appeal to me the most on there, and I read them. So that's kind of what I did during my, I guess, around 2 years, just kind of hiding out in Omaha, doing mostly just reading. So I started to read all these different books that are recommended there, as well as like just talking to other intelligent friends and just figuring out what's the best things to read. And
Okay. So what are your favorites then, other than what you kind of cited?
oh man, there's so many different favorites. And like if you ask me at different points in time, I'll probably say something completely different.
Right. Right. So a question that came up already in the chat before you came in was you write your name mimetic, M-I-M. So we're not talking about when people hear the word, or when people hear the term mimetic, it's sort of unclear if it's mimetic in the sense of memes or mimetic in the sense of mimesis. And yours is conscious in that regard, right? So you're talking about mimesis, not memes. Is that right?
Yes,
Right.
yeah, they're definitely related, but
Right.
definitely I would say I'm more focused on the mimesis.
Right. So someone is asking in the chat about Peter Thiel, and I think that is one of your kind of explicit references, right? Q.
Yeah, yeah. So at the back of Tulsa Titans, it listed all the interviewees' favorite books, and the only book that Peter Thiel recommended was "Things Hidden Since the Foundation of the World." And while everyone else, especially like Naval, listed probably like 20 books, and everyone else listed at least five, but he just listed the one. And it's this book that wasn't a lot of the other books, like everyone recommended the same books over and over again, but he listed one book that nobody else ever recommended. It's just him, and that was
Right.
his only choice. So I wrote a thread about that in probably last June, and I've just basically said some random things on the top of my head about it, and that thread blew up, and I gained like 3,000 followers overnight.
From talking about what in particular?
Uh, so I deleted my tweets a couple times, but so it's not publicly available anymore. But basically, I had a thread of like around, I think, 15 tweets, kind of talked about like why did Peter Thiel choose to recommend this one book, and I didn't even really talk much about mimetic theory in that thread, but basically like when you choose a book that nobody else recommends, there's something special in that, because then it catches the attention of the right people. So you're kind of filtering out the information. You're filtering out the wrong people, because most people, they just say, oh, this book is popular, this is at the top of the New York Times bestseller list, I mean, get it. But he recommends something that nobody else recommends, so that kind of shows you that he's trying to think about things in a way that's different from other people. And not only that, like the book is not written in a good style. It's not even written in a style that's very decipherable. It's just like these guys having this random conversation going all over the place, and it's just a transcript of it. and like also they bring up a whole bunch of references of people that you you usually would never hear about, and so you have to kind of do your own research to get through the book.
And this is the book by Rene Girard that you're talking about. Is that
Yeah,
right?
yeah, and actually, I would not recommend to start with that one if you want to get into Gerard.
Well, maybe you could save people the time and you could help them understand why that book is so important.
I don't know if it's that booking itself is so important, but it's more of like it's very interesting to choose a book to recommend where first it's only one book, so that way people's attention is focused on only that one thing. They're not distracted by too many things. And then also it's something that requires a lot of prerequisite knowledge to understand. So that way it kind of you're basically recommending multiple books, but you only have to say the title of one word, one book. And also like the title of the book was very intriguing, like things hidden since the foundation of the world. So kind of like draws you in. And I basically in that thread I talked about Robert Cialdini's influence on persuasion books and how this is like a very master persuader type of thing to do, but like you're not trying to be a master persuader to the masses. You're trying to target specific people who are kind of more unusual thinkers.
Right. Okay. And you think that book is an example of that?
The way he recommended it, I would say that's a good example.
Oh, the way Thiel recommends it.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, Peter Thiel definitely is working some kind of deeper strategy, right? He's playing some kind of four-dimensional chess game with the culture. Is that how you see it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Could you tell us your read on him?
Mm, I don't know. It's tough to say because he keeps things very privately. It's very interesting how like he invested in I think Facebook and maybe also Twitter early on, and so he's very interested in these social networks. He invests in them, and he says he invests in them because he understands the mimetic behavior of people. But at the same time, he doesn't participate in them. He never tweets anything. He never posts anything on Facebook. He's just off the grid. So it's quite an interesting behavior because usually, like the other investors, like Mark Andreessen or like the founder of Facebook and Twitter, they all post on their own platform, right? But
Right.
he says, okay, I know it's gonna be good. I'm going to invest in it, but I'm not gonna post anything.
So you wrote this Twitter thread about Peter Thiel's recommendation of that book, and
Yeah,
that Twitter thread went viral. You said, and
yeah,
you got 3,000 followers just from that. Did you say?
yeah.
And probably was one of those people the person who gave you a job in Seattle.
Yeah.
That's fascinating. So who exactly did your tweeting um, find itself spread among exactly? Is it like tech people
Um,
in like the
I,
U.S.
I
West
think,
Coast or what?
yeah, I think a lot of tech people, but not not only tech people. And like, I don't even know why, but like Jocko also followed me. So Jocko Willem, the guy who wrote Extreme Ownership, the Navy SEAL.
Right. Sorry, people are complaining about the volume, so I'm just going to fix it a little bit more. Um, all right. Sorry. All right. Someone wants to know, do you have a girlfriend?
Not at the moment.
But
Why?
you love to work out, we've noticed.
Yeah. I think that's a very important part of like just like to be a complete human being.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it definitely helps you think better.
Mhm.
Like you think better when you're really physically fit and strong. I think that's a true fact of like the bro intellectual
Mhm.
milieus.
Yeah.
Are you like friends with other it I get the vibe that there's kind of like a Twitter crew of
Mhm.
like men who weightlift and like theorize, especially around like business strategy? Is that a thing?
Um, man, I feel like I'm in many circles that are not supposed to be connected, but I'm just in them.
Right. It's interesting. I don't know. This is like the impressions that I get, and I'm kind of trying to like map the the subcultures of Twitter.
Hmm.
And it seems like
Right.
you're kind of in that subculture.
Yeah, a little bit. But like I also have
Yeah.
some other circles.
Okay. Well, what would you describe your other circles as?
Let's see. Wait, so actually your volume is now low for me. I don't know why.
Oh, can you turn your sound up or no?
I think I'm at the highest. Yeah.
Uh, Is it any better if I bring the mic closer?
It's about the same.
Is it so it's hard for you to hear?
It's not too bad, but it's like it just suddenly got like a lot quieter for some reason.
Yeah, it's because I did turn my volume down because people are complaining. People are saying that I'm too loud and you're too soft.
Mhm.
So
Okay.
it just must be some unfortunate anomaly with our different microphones or whatever.
Yeah, I'm just using the default on my laptop.
Yeah,
So
no worries. It's no big deal. It happens
mhm.
every now and then, weird snags.
Okay.
But if you can hear me like if it's good enough, I think we'll just roll with it if that's
Yeah.
okay.
Okay. Okay. I think it's good now.
Okay, cool. Yeah, someone in the chat was saying that there's like a certain kind of a crew or milieu on Twitter
Hmm.
of like hashtag Insight Bros.
Kinda, but like I would say like probably like the different circles I've been involved in kind of changed over time, but also I'm just kind of cycling through different people, and this is something that has never been possible before. So I feel like yeah. Do you follow this guy Paul Scalise? I think like he's completely wrong about how Twitter is like Lindy and how it's like the bar. No, it's fucking bullshit because at the bar you only have one conversation going on at once, but on Twitter you can have like 20 going on at once. This is something that had never happened before.
Yeah, it's true. You can have as many different pockets as you want and you can cycle between them. Well, to
Yeah.
some degree though, because things you say for one group can kind of get punished by the other groups a little bit,
Yeah.
but not really. No, you're right. I mean, you can definitely cycle. So what were your early tell us about your evolution then? Like what was your earlier like internet
Mhm.
circles and how did they change?
Wait, internet or Twitter?
Well, you were saying whatever, however you want to define it. You were saying you've kind of shifted or moved through different
Yeah.
Twitter worlds.
Yeah. So early on the internet, I guess I probably started mostly like some Rubik's cube solving groups, like on the internet. But
No.
then afterwards, I got into like the kind of like the bodybuilding trolling circles. So we would make all these fake accounts on Facebook, like Glenn Buterol or like Trent Malone or some test Posterone or like Diana Ball, like these kind of pun names, and we just like create all these fake profiles and put like random like Instagram models as our profile pics or like random fat people we like to make fun of, and
Okay.
we just like have a whole bunch of alt accounts and just like troll random people. So that was probably like maybe like 8 years ago.
And that was just those are people who weightlift, but that was just trolling.
Yeah, yeah. So
And
that
then you
was like
kind
8 years ago. Yeah.
8 years ago, yeah.
Mhm.
And then you grew up, you read some, Peter Thiel and Rene Girard, and then you started upgrading your game to
Mhm.
you went from weightlifting and trolling to weightlifting and philosophy. Is that fair to say?
Uh, kind of. Well, I actually dropped the lifting after a while. Like I was probably at my strongest in 2014.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Then I basically hit my goals in lifting, and I kind of stopped, and I just said, okay, what I want to do is my life. Like I don't want to continue with this university environment, and I just want to have some time out. And all these books, I have like a huge reading list I just never get around to. So I just decided to just chill, just do some readings for a couple of years.
Right on. And during that time, were you like running a business or working for wages or what? Just
No, so basically, I said fuck school. I'm just out of here, and I had no plans. I just like
How did you make
moved to
money?
I moved to a cheap place, and I was living off of like rent was like $300 a month in Omaha, and then like if you just buy like ground beef, avocados, and whatever, you can actually live off of like $6 per day for food, and you'll get like a pretty good like ketogenic diet. It's pretty
Yeah,
high protein and high fat.
right.
Yeah, if you just cook for yourself.
No, you're right. If you just minimize your expenses, you can actually
Mhm.
live quite cheap. In fact, I mean, I'm
Right.
probably going to be doing that soon. Like probably starting in a couple weeks, I'm going to be I'm probably going to have no job, and I'm going to have to just
Mhm.
like live without money for a while.
Mhm.
I don't know exactly how it's going to work. It's a little bit harder for me because I have a wife, and she's cool. Like she's down. But uh, yeah, we're gonna have to probably like eat like a lot of ground beef and live in Omaha too.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, okay. So yeah, the point is you can get away with not working for a while, and you were just reading and eating mad ground beef, lifting weights.
No, I wasn't even lifting because I couldn't afford the gym. So I just all I did was just I did the readings, and then I said that basically what did I do? And then afterwards I was like looking online. It's like what should I do? Maybe I should get a job. And my parents are complaining you should get a job, man. And I said I don't want to get a fucking bullshit job. Like if I because I don't want to waste my mental energy on anything.
Hell yeah.
And I realized it's like yeah I can get a job like I can get a software job if I want to, but then I'll be like, man, I'm stuck in this nerd identity, and also my mind is being controlled by somebody else. So I said, no, fuck this, I don't want to do that. So what I did was I was I think it was like James Altucher was interviewing Nassim Taleb, and what he said was basically going to if you get like a job as a night security watchman, then you can do anything you want. You just like get paid, sit there. So I'm like, okay, that's great. I'm just gonna sit there and or walk around and listen to some podcasts, listen to some audiobooks, get a Kindle, read some books, and that's what I did for a couple of months.
Oh, did you do that? So you were a security watch person, and you just listened to mad podcasts and read books.
Oh yeah, I was like, okay, it's 10 p.m. I'm gonna be out all night. Let me download like 1,000 podcasts, 1,000 and then just get a whole bunch of yeah probably like over 1,000 books on my Kindle, and I just did a lot of readings, and whenever I need to go out to do a patrol I just put on the podcast, listen at double speed, and just like walk around. Nobody else was out there, just like chilling in the park listening to podcasts all night.
Right. Awesome. That sounds great. And so when in that did you start writing and developing your own
um,
ideas?
so during that time, so that was like I did that for maybe like 5 or 6 months, and then during that time I was also going to like these entrepreneurship meetups in the city, and they were like, holy shit, why are you talking about all these different ideas that nobody else is talking about, and we want you to help out with this startup. My business is failing, what do I do? So basically they just like these people wanted to bring me on to all these different projects, and I just kind of talked with them to try to sort out their problems. And essentially what I had was the 4 hour work week. I just said, okay, I'm gonna work for you like on my own schedule. I'm not gonna. I might be here one day for like 5 hours, 10 hours, just hanging out. The next day or the next whole week, I might just like not be here at all. And they say, okay, sure, that's cool. So I did that, and they basically just pay me decent amount per week, and I don't even have to do anything.
And what
I
kind of
could
work was
if I
that?
want to. What's that?
What kind of work was that?
It's consulting for like small businesses and startups. I basically just negotiated for complete freedom. They're not paying me much, but I can do anything I want on my own time. And if I come up with some cool idea, I'll tell them about it. That's basically the contract.
And you found those gigs by going to entrepreneurship meetups?
Yeah, yeah. Like I wasn't even looking for a gig. I was just like talking to people, trying to have a good time. And then people said they have all these problems and they think I have good ideas, so they just want me to I guess join them and help them.
And did they know about your ideas from like the internet, or just because you were talking about them in the meetings?
No, I had nothing on the internet at that time. I was just talking.
Nice. Okay, cool. So you're going to these entrepreneurship meetings, just sharing cool ideas that people have never heard about before. And you're like,
Hmm.
whoa, and people are like, whoa, that's crazy. That's interesting. You can help me with this. You get work
Hmm.
that way. And okay, so what comes next? You're reading more, and then I guess do you get more into kind of the ideas angle, and then you start writing, or when do you start kind of writing more seriously?
Um, let's see. I think I started to write some stuff in 2017, and that's kind of when I registered the website. But it wasn't really all that publicized. I didn't really bother publicizing any of it. It's just I write something that I think sounds cool, and then I send it to a couple friends to look at, and they're like, "Okay, this sounds pretty cool. You should write a book." And I just write like random notes, and kind of kept on going until I decided to make that one PowerPoint thing. And then someone I was working with, he thought it was really good, and just started to show more people in the startup community there my PowerPoint.
Right.
And then and then actually, like, one of the people I've been talking to a lot is I was talking to a lot at that time was I was talking to Martyr Made online. He was another podcaster.
Oh
And
yeah, someone mentioned him in the chat. So
yeah,
what's this?
yeah.
What's the story there?
So I was listening to Jocko podcast. It was one of the early ones, maybe like around episode 30, and Jocko recommended Martyr Made. He's like, this, you should check out this guy Martyr Made. His podcast is like as good as Dan Carlin's Hardcore History. So I checked it out, and I listened to his whole podcast, and I thought, yeah, it's pretty interesting stuff. And then I basically, I think I was trolling on Facebook. Like, it was right before the election. It was like a couple months before the election, and just trolling all these people who were freaking out about Trump. And then I think I think Martyr Maid also somehow found my trolling amusing, and then we just kind of became friends.
Okay.
And
Okay.
then he started to recommend me all these books I never heard about, and I started to read those as well, and that kind of continued for a while. And
Okay.
yeah,
Interesting.
yeah. So
Interesting.
basically, I got on Twitter because I wanted to like message him more, and like he's very inconsistent with his Facebook messaging. Sometimes he would just like not reply for a couple of weeks, and then he'll send you this like long ass essay. But then I know that's like at the same time he's just like always on Twitter.
Okay. And is that podcast still going?
Martyr Made podcast, yeah.
Yeah, I thought someone in the chat seems to think that they stopped it, or he might be referring to something else. I'm not sure.
The other one, the Clown of the West, did stop, but it seems like Ebert is starting his own thing again, and Martyr Made is still gonna continue as Martyr Made.
Interesting. Interesting. Okay. And so, someone earlier in the chat wanted to know: is there a secret to how do you get a job through shit posting? What's the magic?
Um, I think you just have to be brutally honest with yourself. Like, you can't just be kind of fronting like you're some hot shit or whatever. You just do whatever, and if they find you interesting, then it works out, I guess.
And you just get a job offer.
Yeah,
Move to Seattle. We like your shit posting. Please move to Seattle. We have a
yeah,
job for you.
pretty much.
Interesting. So, cool. So, what do you think? What is kind of one of the overarching insights of your model or your perspective? Because I think from what I've gathered, I kind of went through a lot of your stuff, and it seems like you do have this kind of big idea organized around mimetic value. Like you pitch your body of ideas as related to a theory of value, basically. So
Yeah.
maybe we could go into that a little bit more deeply. Could you tell us kind of what's the big idea there about the theory of value?
Um. So first, I guess I want to avoid having some sort of overarching grand theory, some sort of like grand framework, because I
Okay.
think that's like very restrictive. So one of my favorite philosophers, Lev Shestov. I think I've recommended him to you probably a long time ago. I don't know if you've read him.
Okay, I think I recall. I haven't
Yeah,
read recently. I might have looked into
yeah.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Shestov was a so he was a Russian existentialist philosopher from like about 100 years ago, and he was the first one to notice the connection between Nietzsche and Dostoevsky, and he was one of the big influences for to Camus, and also he has also influenced Deleuze. But he was this just a crazy Russian guy, and like one of his I think one of his earliest works he had. It's not his first book, but it's one of the earlier ones. It's called All Things Are Possible, and that's the book that I've probably reread the most, and I've
Hmm.
also gifted that book more than any other book. And basically, he just contradicts himself every other page with like all these shit posts. And like one of them, he was like mocking Socrates for like crying to his pupils while he was dying drinking hemlock. He's like, no, the best death is to just like die in a foreign land where nobody's around you, so you can just have time to yourself. Yeah, yeah. He just
so
like
so it's like a
yeah,
book of shit posting.
yeah, pretty much. So
Interesting.
basically, and that's also what the Zen riddles are like. Like I think he also interviewed Storm King a while back, and he recommended this book by the Zen master. I think his name was Joshu, and basically it's the same thing. Like Joshu had one Zen koan, which basically um, some random Zen monk asked him, it's like, what is enlightenment? And he says, a puddle of piss. And then the monk was like, what do you mean? Can you show me? And then like Joshu zips down his pants. It's like, yo, oh, you sure about it? I'm ready to piss on you.
Oh yeah, so that's one of the things you and I have in common is
Mhm.
we're both strong admirers of Diogenes of Sinope.
Yeah.
So that's very the story you just told is
Mhm.
reminiscent of Diogenes, who famously shit all over the stage at the Isthmian Games.
Yeah.
If you are to believe some of the accounts, you know, it's all secondhand, but that's one of the famous anecdotes.
hmm
Right. So I guess what's the underlying message here? There's a kind
Oh
of
yeah. So basically, one thing that Shestov said is like metaphysics and logical positivism are the same thing. And if you buy into either one of them too seriously, you're just a coward. You're too fearful of experiencing like anything real. It's
right,
kind of like when Mike Tyson says everyone has a plan until they get punched in the mouth. It's the same idea.
right, right. Yeah, that there's a kind of
Mhm.
almost um, impossible to discuss or debate fundamental primacy of material reality
Yeah.
and the body and you know the ability to do things has this just kind of unspeakable, undebatable priority over all of the kind of language games that we play.
hmm
Something like that.
Yeah, like one thing that Shestov said was like if you're into philosophy and metaphysics, it just really means that you have this attachment, this like fetish for like discussions and talking. You have this like this big fetish for like polite conversation or something like that. And that's like that's something that is one of my criticisms of the IDW. Like overall, I like a lot of what they say, but
Mhm.
at the same time, it's I don't like certain aspects of it. It's like, oh, we need to have these polite conversations, and that's how we solve every problem. And
Yeah,
I mean, we can have some of those. We're having one right now. It's fine, but it's not what's going to solve every single problem.
right. Definitely. I mean, one of my big beefs with the whole like quote unquote IDW folks and that like kind of culture or that approach is they kind of like style themselves as very kind of like radical critics of the establishment, but it's pretty clear that they all more or less want to be like a replacement establishment.
hmm
You know, they all very much operate on very shared kind of standard liberal assumptions about how the role of the intellectual is to basically provide this performance of admirable, respectable kind of intellectual leadership, but to more or less kind of like convince the admiring masses and kind of keep them in line more or less. Like it's very much this kind of like liberal, uh, 20th century liberal democratic mold. Whereas I've always been more into like no, the role of the real intellectual is to just be like a constant aggressive gadfly trying
Yeah.
to uh, pull the rug out from underneath like
Mhm.
all of the reigning lies that are the basis of pretty much all like currently existing institutionalized culture at any given status quo. Um, and yeah, so I'm not a big fan of how the IDW kind of traffics in like this image of being this like radical subversive force, but
Mhm.
I don't think that's really what's going on.
Yeah. Yeah, like one of the things Shestov said was this is a direct quote: the business of philosophy isn't to reassure, but to upset.
Hmm. Hmm.
So that's why, like, I think trolling is just the highest form of philosophy. You just gotta like poke at people and see how they.
Oh, you broke up for a second, but someone
Okay,
was
yeah.
saying that, and this is kind of uh, relevant to what you just said, which is that someone like Diogenes was kind of like the early cynics were kind of like the first Western version of shit posting, like kind of
Hmm.
literally, if you
Yeah.
take that anecdote to be true.
Hmm.
Yeah. So okay, so let's go back onto the main thread of your theory of value. This was kind of a bit of a tangent talking about
Right.
because you were talking about Shestov and then uh but that was I think only one bullet point on your larger
Hmm.
larger theory, is that right? So take us from there.
Yeah. Yeah. So basically, you don't want to have too rigid of a model, but you want to be prepared for anything. And like, yeah, I guess we could go into the mimetic theory aspect, but I don't know. That almost feels like it's too much to unpack, and I would have to like look through all my notes that are kind of like disorganized and everywhere, and kind of like sort that through.
Sure. Well, I mean, we can give people the really quick and dirty TLDR.
Mhm.
Rene
Yeah.
Girard and Peter Thiel
Okay.
are very
Okay. So here's an interesting point I'll bring up. So
sure.
there's this one book called The Empire Value by Orlean. I think that's his last name. Yeah. And what he basically said is that he basically already kind of did a mimetic theory perspective of economics. And what he basically said is like, um, kind of Adam Smith and Marx, they're both wrong, but they're wrong because they're the same thing. They're too focused on the materialism. They're not realizing that humans are have mimetic desires.
Right.
So they're very attached to this like they think there's intrinsic value in things, but there isn't. It's just it's basically this interdividual consensus where you basically one person desires something, the other person desires it too. So like scarcity, it's not even like a real thing. I mean, it's kind of real, but it's like it's not the most fundamental step. You only perceive something as scarce when somebody else desires it.
Hmm.
So it kind of goes back to the 10th commandment. You shouldn't covet whatever your neighbor has.
Right. Yeah. It's like the productivity of contemporary capitalism has become really quite impressive and sophisticated to the degree that most people in Western countries don't really want for much materially,
Mm.
but in their sense of their own worth or their own self value, they compare themselves to others, and that's a virtually unlimited sense of scarcity because
Yeah,
status and rank are intrinsically scarce, right? So someone else, it's intrinsically zero sum, right? If someone else is higher up in the hierarchy, someone else has to be a little bit lower down.
yeah,
And so the idea, right, is that like so many people basically live their entire lives just obsessively trying to maximize this kind of perceived uh just this their perception of what is socially valuable, but that image of what's socially valuable is actually only a reflection of what other people think is socially valuable. So it's this like endless sort of hall of mirrors where there's nothing really
Mhm.
ultimately valuable about it. It's just people's values reflecting on each other, and that causes like the masses, so to speak, to basically be like constantly chasing after these these like ideals or values that aren't even real, and actually makes them that's kind of one of the driving causes, if you will, of so much kind of stupid, wasteful herd behavior. That's kind of that. I mean, that's like in a very cartoonish way, the kinds of things that I've heard Peter Thiel talk about a few different times.
Mhm. Yeah, and like in my own experience when I was living in Omaha was basically nothing. I had a lot of friends who were working at these really great jobs at like Facebook, Google, or like investment banks. They were jealous of me. They're like, man, you mean you can go to work anytime you want and set your own hours and just like do anything you want, say anything you want, and just like spend the day just chilling, walking around parks, listening to podcasts. And they were jealous of that. But like I was only spending maybe like $600 to $800 a month. But I had complete freedom. I had like probably less than 4 hours of work I had to do per week, and just like pure freedom.
Right. Do you have are you a social person or are you kind of reclusive?
I would say like I really believe in this idea of like what do you call it? The barbell investment strategy. So like I want to be in both extremes, but I don't really want to be somewhere lukewarm in the middle.
Hmm.
So I'm perfectly fine being by myself for long extended periods of time, like nobody. But at the same time, like if I want to just like go out and party every day or go out and just like talk to interesting people in depth one on one, like I can do that like for extended periods of time too, no problem.
Right. Right.
So
How,
that's really part of my overarching philosophy, which is like you should just be able to adapt to any situation, just like be open to all the situations, and you want to know that you can win and you can provide value in any situation possible.
right. So we have a nice constructive question from my friend Jacob Chamomile TV, who wants us to discuss the question: uh, Can the culture be made better, or are we fucked? And there's no way to fix the culture. What do you think,
Man,
Q?
man, like I've thought a lot about this, but like every day I probably think something different.
Well, what do you think on this day?
Um, I think maybe that's not even an important question. I think it's more important to live the way that you want to live according to what's actually happening in reality. Just like, okay, let me look at what reality is right now and what's the best thing I can do for myself. And you just take action and do it rather than complain about this thing is going wrong, that thing is going wrong.
Yeah, I have a lot of sympathy with that view. I actually tend to think that people, when their goal is to help society, they tend to fuck things up.
Hmm.
But when their goal is to just like look at themselves and look at their situation and just think as honestly and clearly as possible, like what are the difficult but ethically necessary choices in front of me that are good for me and good for the people around me and that are would bring my that would be true, you know, in other words, like what is immediately true, you know, like people think about like what is true as a kind of philosophical puzzle, like abstract truths, but usually it's a matter of like in your own life, like you do things on a daily basis that you know you're kind of lying. You know, it's like there are things we always are constantly doing for some reason. We thought it was necessary or we thought we had to do it for whatever reason. But like half of the things we do on a daily basis, we're kind of like pretending to be something we're not, and we're kind of maintaining all of these hypocrisies. And it's like if you just refuse to do those and you just try to do what's most true, you're not trying to like fix the culture or society. You're just trying to um, be true and make sense of things. Like if you just do that, I find in my experience anyway, you can actually see how if everyone did that, the culture
Hmm.
would actually it could be fixed. Like the culture and the society at large could be much better.
Yeah.
But but it's not in part because you have all these people running around doing crazy ass stupid shit because they think they're trying to make the culture better. It's like, just
Right.
give up that idiotic idea.
Yeah. Yeah. So here's where I think Jocko really got right, and also what David Goggins really got right. So it's so they're I guess they're two Navy SEALs who recently came out with some pretty good books, and they're hold up, where should I start? Actually, let me start with Jordan Peterson. He said clean your room. I think that's a very good thing to do. I think that's, and I don't really necessarily do that all the time, but I try to remind myself that I should do that. But
Yeah.
like that really is, I think, the fundamental axiom that builds up to this. But the thing is, like, sometimes he doesn't practice that himself. In fact, a lot of times on Twitter he doesn't. He started to tweet about some random shit he doesn't even know what he's talking about, and he gets into that. but but if you just like, but if you just always remind yourself, like, no, clean your own room, why do you even care about this topic that you know nothing about? I think things will be a lot better. And I think
Yeah.
like Jocko and Goggins are a lot better at living this.
Hmm. Yeah, no, I think there's a lot of truth to that, and I think that's why Jordan Peterson's so popular. Like that
Mhm,
message obviously resonates with people, and in some simple sense, it definitely does work. I mean,
mhm,
I think I've sort of had this observation that in our culture, a lot of the people coming out with these interesting ideas that you're citing, everything gets kind of filtered through this like very segmented kind of like cultural market. Do you know what I mean? It's like
mhm.
there are lots of people who look at someone like Jordan Peterson and they're just like, that's not for me. That's not my
Mhm.
type of person. That's not
Yeah,
my aesthetics. That's not my milieu. That's not my subculture. And certainly someone like Jocko and like these other people, it's like these
mhm,
people kind of appeal to maybe like,
mhm.
people like you and I, like whatever middle-aged, men working on entrepreneurial ventures or whatever. This sort of like there's a kind of subcultural kind of consistency or whatever that works there. But a whole variety of other people will look at someone like Jocko Willink or Jordan Peterson and just be like, it can't get through. The message just
Yeah,
doesn't get through. You know
yeah,
what I mean? And I think
yeah, yeah.
that's one of the really difficult and unfortunate features of our culture right now. But I think it's fairly hardwired. It's like
Mhm.
for messages to really get through to an audience, it needs to be aesthetically and sociologically packaged in the right
Mhm.
way. And so,
Yeah,
yeah, I mean, I don't have too much to add to that other than to say, like, in the way I think about these things, and I think it's very similar, but it's just a slightly different aesthetic sociological packaging.
yeah,
Is that I just think about it in the terms of honesty. Like that's the term my mind always goes back to, is because like it doesn't really matter how you can package this or frame this idea in many different ways, but ultimately like people know when they're being honest with themselves and when they're not. Like you feel it pretty clearly, and it's like it can look so different for different people. It can mean totally different things. But if like usually what's best for you and what is also uh, like productive and a positive contribution to the culture at large. Um, to me, I think the one of the most like general ways to basically describe it is just trying to like always be increasing your kind of radical honesty like with
yeah.
yourself and how you conduct your life.
Mhm. Yeah, definitely agree with that. And now let me try to tie that together with some crazy philosophical ideas.
Please do.
Yeah. So we can return back to mimetic desire from here. So one of the things that Gerard says about mimetic desire is actually it's a metaphysical desire of like it's an ontological desire. It's like, who do you actually want to be, and are you living out like the way you want to be, and that's why we have these mimetic models. We
Hmm.
look at these models and say, okay, this guy's kind of living out the life I kind of want to have, so I'm gonna learn a little bit from him. I'm gonna
Right.
mimic him, and or some other person, you're gonna mimic them. And I actually wrote a little blog post on this last year called metaphysics, desire, and aesthetics, something like that. And like everyone, they're just gonna have different aesthetics that appeal to them, and that's almost unnegotiable. That's like a core value that you're born with, and different aesthetics are just gonna appeal to different people, and you can't basically convince people with one aesthetic using mimetic models who have a different aesthetic.
Right.
But like when you're being truthful to yourself, like radical honesty to yourself, that basically it kind of really fixes the world in like a rhizomatic way. Like if everyone just practices that, it kind of just like builds up from there.
Yeah, I think that I think I know exactly what you're saying because like if you try to give someone a model, like you try to give them a theory or kind of even just an explanation or advice, like how you should fix your life or how you can contribute to the culture.
Yeah.
Any formula you give, if it's going to have some aesthetic, it's going to have some kind of like sociological packaging that is going to be attractive to some people. It's going to map onto their mimetic desire, as you say. But then for the large majority of other people, that particular aesthetic is not going to map onto their mimetic desire, so it's going to fail, right?
Mhm.
But honesty, you totally understand what I was saying. Like you're bouncing back to me. You're on the same vibe as me. You're on the same wavelength, which is like honesty is kind of a uniquely flexible way to put it because it's not really imposing a particular aesthetic. It's like the basis upon which anyone can kind of develop their own aesthetic and do, they can impose the mimetic value that they want, but it's a term, it's a framework that kind of everyone knows and can understand, and we can kind of talk about it equally in some sense.
Yeah, yeah. So in Zen, there's a saying like you turn the light inward. So that's kind of what you're doing with that
Mm.
radical honesty to yourself. You're not really projecting outward. You're kind of like just turning it to the to yourself to really examine yourself, like what is radically honest for yourself. And you actually, I feel like how do I explain this? So tantric Buddhism, they also have some interesting stuff in there, and they really focus on this like personalized solution. They know like once one solution for one person is not necessarily gonna be effective for someone else. Like in fact, you might want to teach people in the opposite ways. Like maybe for one person with a certain okay, what they say is everyone is beginninglessly enlightened, but we all have like all these different configurations of neuroses that we have to deal with in our own way.
Mm.
But and the key is to kind of realize you're already beginninglessly enlightened, and this layer of neuroses, it's just a filter, and it's also very similar to what Heidegger says about the mood. The mood is kind of like a filter that kind of like filters how you see the configuration of the world.
Right.
And yeah, and in tantric Buddhism, you have your teacher or whatever they call it, who basically serves as your mimetic model, but they're like very self aware about like what your aesthetic is, so they can kind of like change, kind of like just personalize a solution for you. At least that's like in theory if they do it right. Of course, there's also like all these like weird cults and scandals and shit, like
Right.
with all the religions.
But you did make a good point before about how the mimetic desire, it is there for a good reason. That
Mhm.
it's for following and being attracted to what you do admire, and to being able
Yeah.
to be motivated by visions of, when you see someone doing something good, to be motivated by that and to be strongly pulled by that. And that is ultimately a good thing. So that's a useful thing to remember, because there is a tendency to see this mimetic desire as purely negative. It's like this is how everyone is so stupid and they're just socially conformists following each other,
Mhm.
but it's not. It's not that. So so in your model, like art, in other words, like good art would basically be the kind of healthy, productive um, kind of cultivation of mimetic desire in others or something like that.
Yeah, yeah, it could be. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's interesting. I think it's interesting with kind of the flattening of the media environment, with things like YouTube and Twitter, where it's like people, in like the 50s and 60s or whatever, people all had their sights set on kind of like the people at the very top of the broadcast media hierarchy, and those were kind of like the structuring figures that people oriented themselves to. And now there's just this wild variety of different people that you can basically look up to and get advice from and read the books of and watch the YouTube channels of, or whatever. So I feel like what's kind of going on is it's like, if you imagine like every individual, let's say, has some kind of like optimal mimetic desire or something, some vision of a type of person who is just for their constitution and their temperament, their personality type. There's like a particular ideal image of the coolest possible person. And that there's a lot of variety, right? There's going to be a lot of variance across individuals. It's like back in the 50s or 60s, all those people had to average out their differences in a really kind of brutal way by all kind of looking up to and kind of admiring like a relatively small set of people. And now it's like the rise of like all these internet famous people who are like not half as famous as whatever, like Tom Brokaw or something like that in the 60s or whatever, much less famous, but there's thousands of them. And I think that's basically because they're each kind of like satisfying or optimized. They're meeting that kind of highly idiosyncratic, mimetic optimal for like a number of different communities or something like that. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So I kind of want to go back to what I said earlier. You know how on Twitter it's not Lindy. You're talking to different organizations at the same time. So this is a very new thing, and really to process this, you kind of have to be at a higher stage of consciousness. So there's this psychologist with this model of cognitive development. So basically, his name is Robert Kagan, and he basically starts off with Piaget's model of psychological development from the kid learning abstraction and stuff like that. But then he says it doesn't end when you become an adult. That's only stage 3. You then have stage 4, which is you got to think in a more systematic way, and then stage 5, where you realize the systems all kind of work, but they all kind of break down eventually. So that's also why I don't really want to have like this grand unified theory, because when you have a grand unified theory, you're stuck at stage 4. You're not going to stage 5. You're not accounting for these because it's impossible to just have this logically consistent grand unified theory. You kind of see all these exceptions everywhere. And in stage 5, you kind of just like accept the nebulosity. Yeah. So anyway, what I'm saying with this is like in this I guess John David Ebert would call the hypermodern world that we now live in. It's beyond postmodern, it's hypermodern, where we're fragmenting in all these different kind of internet subcultures, and also everything's just increasing in complexity. You have to be at a higher stage of consciousness to even realize what you're doing. So like based on the mediums of the past, like maybe like 100 years ago, 50 years ago, you're able to have a much more concrete mimetic model. So you're able to see like just this one guy on TV, or you can just like read the Bible and say, okay, Jesus is it. I'm just gonna follow this one mimetic model. It's very concrete. You just have like this one idea of what you ought to be. But now on the internet, you're exposed to all these different people, all these like mini celebrities, and you just start to think, oh, I want to be like an aspect of this person, but I also want to be a bit of this person. And your consciousness kind of just like really fragments into all these different, like thousands of different parts, where you take a little bit from one person and take a little bit from the other. But then you're kind of a jack of all trades. You're not really going deep into one thing. So there's a lot of trade-offs in that.
Right. So what do you think is the best way to play that? Because there are many failure modes there, right? Like one failure mode is if you go too far in one game, you can get punished in the other games, basically.
Yeah.
And sometimes that's a good thing. Sometimes that's a bad, like sometimes, let's say you're playing multiple games, you can make one like really good move in one game that maybe it makes you lose like a bunch of other games you're kind of embedded in. But if you win big enough in the one game, you can afford to lose in the other games. And then that can be a winning play. But sometimes if you're trying to play multiple games, you can kind of do something half-assed in one where you're trying to play one game, but you get punished in the other games and you don't actually win in the one game you're playing well enough to make up for the other ones. And then you just kind of are half-assed at all your games. There are many different failure modes. Like how do you see What is the strategy of optimally playing that?
Okay, so I guess I'll bring up 2 points. So first is like Shostov is very anti-universalist, and also like Camus is also like the world is absurd. You can't just have this one universal solution that applies to everyone. Maybe some people just need to do something different, and you just there's no such thing as a solution in an algorithm that really applies to everyone. But then there's another perspective, which is in Omaha, one of my good friends there, he's a software engineer, and he basically always talks about this thing called a convergent sub problem, which and his example is money. So what he says is like if you don't know what you want to do with your life, you can solve a convergent sub problem first, which is acquire money. And once you have that, you can kind of use that as a leverage point to do a whole bunch of other different things.
True.
So
True.
money is one thing, and I think um, fitness is another thing, and I think right now in our modern society where everyone's gone too soft, this and everyone kind of already knows that money is something you would want anyway. It's not like a it's not what I should emphasize, but like fitness and mental toughness, I think these are also traits that like I would actually distinguish physical fitness from mental toughness.
Mm.
So these are two other parameters that you can kind of optimize as convergent subproblems. Because if you're mentally tough, that actually I would say that might even be like a meta level beyond money. Because if you're mentally tough, you can if you realize that you need money, you'll find some way to earn it. But if you have the money, you can't really go the other direction. Like you can't use money to buy mental toughness, and you can buy fitness to a degree, like doctors and also a trainer or whatever. But it's you can't really buy that mental toughness.
Right. That's interesting. I would totally agree. Those things are definitely valuable and will help you navigate the strange world that we're in. I, although, one could say there are lots of people who have those traits and who also get sucked into having like pretty sad, resentful, mediocre lives. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I
So
wonder,
there,
like, I wonder if there's a deeper trick to it all.
so I think there's multiple, many dimensions and parameters, and they all kind of like feed into each other, and you can't really say which ones at the very
Mhm.
top. You just kind of have to balance all of them.
Sure.
Like so, another parameter might be like some sort of metacognition, like awareness. Like you just gotta be aware of is whatever you're doing at the moment what you should be doing,
Hmm.
and also like is it bringing you closer to your goals?
Or just changing this. Sorry. Right. Yeah. Something I think about, and this is I guess kind of similar to your what you were saying about mental toughness. It might just be a bit of a spin on that, but I think often what one thing that people really lack that's really screwing them over in the contemporary digital media environment is well, what I was gonna say was people need like disagreeability training or something like that. I don't even know if that's a thing, but all I know is that like so much, like almost 90% of the language that like a normal person uses on a daily basis, like in the workplace or whatever, it's literally just saying sounds to make the people around you happy to get what you need from them or what you want from them or whatever. And it's usually not their fault because it's usually this is just kind of the nature of like hypocritical bourgeois kind of like institutionalized modern society. But it does lead to a real problem because people don't have practice just saying what they actually think and feel. Um, so I've, but then it's interesting because there's this kind of contradiction where on Twitter and on the internet, a lot of people kind of think that the problem there is people go on the internet and they just say what they feel. It's this kind of like constant reactive vomiting of like base feelings and like uncontrolled expressions. And so it's like I don't know how to square that. They both seem to be problems. I think what might be going on is something like, when people go on Twitter and they're like in this highly reactive state where they're like spewing hatred and vile kind of base content at each other. That's not them like cutting loose and saying what they really think and feel. That's like them. They're still kind of like obeying a kind of like cultural script that's not theirs, but it's in part because they have no time or space in their life to actually like explore the wide range of thoughts and feelings that they might actually personally have if they, one, allow themselves to have the thoughts and give them actually allow it to bubble up, and two, exercise like the mental toughness, to use your phrase, of putting out stuff that maybe other people won't really like or whatever. I don't know.
Yeah. So I guess three things. So first, it's like you're basically describing the NPC or the bug man or whatever.
Kind
They're
of,
just
I guess.
following this like algorithm where they're not really thinking for themselves. They're not even self-aware of their own mental processes. They're just kind of going through this motion because they're trapped in this very rigid metaphysical box that's like they're being the frog at the bottom of the well.
Yeah, and I would just add that like that's me most of the time too. Like that's most people most of the time. I'm not like being an elitist about it. It's like it's a natural kind of failure mode. It's common in everyday life. But yeah, go on.
Yeah, and then but at the same time, sometimes maybe this is like reading too much into it, but like like if you're used to like Peter Thiel's way of thinking, you might think maybe these people have a hidden message in their tweets, like when they're angrily tweeting, and you maybe like if you process their tweets, like feed it through some sort of like decryption algorithm, there will actually be some sort of like crazy message inside. Because I always wonder that, and I always try to see like, so I haven't really done this yet, but I'm always wondering like, what if I can just tweet out like some very generic tweet thread, like describing my day or something, but like if you can like decipher it in the right way, like some sort of like cryptographic algorithm, you'll find like some secret insight inside.
Yeah, that's an interesting thought. I mean, I definitely don't think that individuals are playing any kind of like sophisticated cipher, but I would give you that in as masses, like the overall kind of volume or content of the different signals that are sent out on a daily basis in cyberspace.
Right.
Like I definitely kind of see like techno capital as
Yeah.
playing this like ciphering game. And
Yeah.
so it's like each of us as individuals are more or less just, very, very small puppets really in the larger game that techno capital is playing with us. And in that sense, there might be underlying pattern in all of the noise that you could kind of extrapolate in a more meaningful way.
Right.
I would give you something like that maybe.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel like nobody's doing what I just described yet, but at the same time, I think why not? Why don't we tweak like this? Or make things more entertaining, right? If you like, especially if you have like a close group of people who kind of knows what's going on, you can just like have this very generic, boring conversation with each other, but actually you're passing like secret important messages among each other, but like everyone else is just clueless. Or like you're not even having generic conversation. You're having one that's like intentionally you're just trying to make people upset. And everyone's like, oh yeah, you guys are just being assholes or idiots. But actually you're having a very sophisticated like intellectual exchange underneath.
That would be cool. Yeah, you could probably come up with a thing where like you just agree on a few key phrases that are
Mhm.
uh, they are meaningless or they have no obvious meaning on the
Mhm.
surface, but they're basically kind of like in inside jokes,
Yeah.
except it's like the inside joke, but you use it a little bit with greater analytical sophistication. So it's like instead of inside jokes where you just say something no one else understands and you have a laugh about it, that actually has a certain little bit of meaning, and you can kind of piece them together and actually use them to communicate messages. Like that would be, yeah.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. And
Yeah, I mean, you could even make some kind of app where, like, on the surface, you're like you would on the surface it just looks like nonsense, but people who have like the key or something like that,
Mhm.
they see in their browser like the translated version or something. I don't know.
Yeah, yeah,
That
that'd
would
be
be
fun.
one way to terrify Twitter. Like if all of
Mhm.
the like weightlifting like philosophy bros started like speaking in tongues, um, people would get freaked out like crazy.
I mean, there's a couple times I test this out. Like I would like tweet something in Caesar cipher, say like if you can read this, tweet back at me a prime number, and there were a couple people who got it.
Really?
Yeah, and yeah, so like let's go back to like our original topic about like all these people freaking out, panicking, can't communicate, whatever.
Right.
So I was listening to a podcast today by this guy Faraz Zahabi. He's the trainer of GSP, the MMA champion.
Sure. Yeah,
Yeah,
I know a thing or two. I actually just got my blue belt. Thank you
yeah,
very much.
nice, nice. So what he said is like everyone in the world should be at least a blue belt. And what he said is like, and the reason why he says this is like everyone should have the choice to be choose. Everyone should basically have the choice to be either courageous or patient in a situation when someone's frustrating you. Because if you're not at least a blue belt, you're just and if you ignore someone, you're not being patient. You're just being a coward.
Hmm.
So there's a difference. And it's kind of like the same thing as Jordan Peterson's interpretation of that one Bible verse. The so it's like what was it? The meek shall inherit the earth. What
Hmm.
Jordan Peterson's interpretation was that these who know how to wield swords but choose to keep them sheathed shall inherit the earth. So basically, it means you need to be very physically capable and also mentally tough, but you kind of choose to be patient when you feel like you need to be.
Right. Sure. Yeah. There's a line in Nietzsche's Zarathustra too about I'm very bad with remembering lines, but yeah, something about the animal who acts very sweet but really just has no claws.
Mm, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I'm with that message. Definitely. It is
Mhm.
interesting like the relationship between martial arts and thinking and speaking. Like I
Mhm.
think there's an undeniable relationship in the sense that I mean I don't know if there's research on this. I don't know if this would be if you'd find support for this in the data, but I would put some money that you would that basically the more fit you are physically and the more trained you are martially, the more liberty you take saying what you think in difficult situations. I'd bet there's a correlation. I mean, I know there's a
Yeah.
correlation. I don't know if you know this, but basically, upper body strength in men is negatively correlated with egalitarianism.
Okay. I guess I'm very anti-egalitarian.
Is it true? Are you?
Um, it's hard to say. Like, how do you define egalitarian, right?
Well, just like think about a question like, would you support generous social spending to help poor people? Like your answer to that question is gonna become a little less generous, slightly to some
Mhm.
degree. The more bulky,
So,
the more stronger you
so,
are in
so,
the.
so I think there's more layers to this. Have you ever read any Jack Donovan?
I haven't. I think someone has mentioned him to me. I looked into it a little bit, but I haven't read much. Is that the werewolf guy?
Kinda, yeah, yeah,
Right.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah. So basically, it's not a matter of anti-egalitarian because I think he's actually so basically he would separate out the in group and the out group. So he would actually be very egalitarian to the in group because we're all
Right.
bros, we're all equals,
Right.
and if you're the leader, you're the first among equals, and you're kind of like, and it's not necessarily like a permanent position, and basically Sebastian Younger talks about this in Tribe as well. But in other societal structures, like if you're an emperor, then the emperor is like a god, and so that's like a distinct category. And the god is like above everyone else, but the god is also the human sacrifice. So we kind of go back to mimetic theory.
Right. Right.
So like the god is actually more fragile, while like if you're the first among equals, you're more anti-fragile because you understand that's your role that you need to play in that moment, but like you guys are still equals.
Right. So you don't think that upper body strength will make you less egalitarian in general, but maybe it would make you more, it would make your egalitarianism more conditional on the in group. So you'll be more generous with your group, but maybe a little bit more brutal with the out group,
Yeah, possibly. Right,
possibly.
right. Because it also kind of depends on how you like internally define what is your in group and out group, and I think that's just like that's another whole can of worm that's like much more complex.
Right. One thing I feel like I've observed in my life, because I've been training pretty consistently now for like 2 years in jujitsu, and one thing I've noticed is my patience for like basically meaningless like bullshit debates has decreased a lot because one of the things you get I think from training in martial arts is like who's better and who's worse is like very clear. You know,
Mhm,
there's like an undeniable just material reality to domination and you know who's the winner and who's the loser. It's just extremely clear,
mhm.
and
Yeah.
it's usually just a very direct function of skill level and
Mhm,
training time and experience or whatever. And but in any particular moment of sparring or whatever, like who's better and who's worse is like usually clear. And if it's not clear between people in a particular moment, it's unambiguously physically decided. And I
mhm,
think from the more you do that kind of thing, the more you find yourself in when you're in like a meaningless debate that's going in circles, you're just like that. I have no time for this. I have no patience for
yeah.
this because I know what it's like because you can contrast it to like clear and efficient adjudication. Like that's kind of
Mhm,
what like martial arts gives you is like clear and efficient adjudication of of right and wrong of you know dominated and dominant
mhm.
and yeah. So I wonder if there's a kind of more robust
Um,
psychological correlate in there somewhere.
so
Maybe.
so I think, yeah, like when you train the martial art, it's almost like a form of meditation. It kind of gives you more clear mindedness in some sense, and possibly more metacognition, where you're able to kind of like realize, is this the right moment for me to do nuanced thinking, like system two thinking, or is this the right time to do system one thinking? Because a lot of
Right.
people who
Okay.
are just like purely academics, they're stuck in system two thinking. They feel like that's 100% superior, but that's not always the case.
Right. That's
So
true.
you're so they get stuck in the nuances, but sometimes it's like the solution is very obvious. It's like, why are you trying to decide on this petty detail when it doesn't matter? Like the whole thing just doesn't work. Just like discard that.
Right. Yeah, and you also have it. That's right. That's right. And you get a better sense of how it's like ultimately reality sorts itself out.
Hmm.
Like that's one thing I think I've benefited tremendously because I've definitely been guilty of what you just described, like basically living in system two all the time,
Hmm.
overthinking everything. Like I've always overthought everything in my life to a detriment. Um, but yeah, like doing martial arts pretty seriously for an extended period of time, you kind of realize like how much like yeah, thinking helps, studying helps, of course, being conscientious helps these things, but um like in any particular moment, like sparring with someone or competing in martial arts, like no amount of thinking really hard analytically about that particular
Hmm.
moment, that particular conflict or situation is going to help you or solve it or make you better or help you win it. And in fact, it's quite a detriment actually if you're stuck in like a hyper analytical mode when you actually have to perform. And so it's like you realize that it's like when you go to a competition in martial arts or something like that, it's like the winning and losing is going to be decided by a very objective function basically, and
Hmm.
how much brain glucose you burn in in like the 5 minutes before the match has nothing to do with it. Like the reality of what you each put into it in the several months beforehand and the years beforehand is basically going to determine it.
Hmm.
And yeah, I think that's really useful to have something in your life where reality sorts itself out in a way that's palpably beyond like analytical tractability.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think this is the problem. I was dealing with a lot in my early childhood, and like I got into like the best university possible or whatever, and then just like I didn't enjoy that environment because I saw like if I graduated, what am I gonna be? I'm just gonna be some programmer at Facebook or Google, or I'm gonna go maybe do some algorithmic trading, and that's my life. And I feel like no, that's a terrible lifestyle. So I kind of took it to the extremes and just dropped out and did lifting every day. And but then I kind of went to like the other extreme where it said, okay, now I'm the strongest, baddest motherfucker out there. I'm just gonna go out like and just like go out, party, drink, whatever every day, and then just like be the strongest guy in the gym in the morning was a hangover. But then I felt like no, that's not really the life I want either. So I went back to reading a lot. So I stopped lifting and started to read a lot, all these different philosophies to really try to figure out what's going on, try to find some sort of balance. So like I had this intuition that there's a balanced way, but you don't really know how to do it on until you actually run into the problems in your personal life. And right now I feel like I'm at a pretty good balanced spot and I'm trying to get there more and more. And really it's not like a static balance where you're always at the same middle level. Like that's not what the Buddha means by the middle way. It means that you can kind of like fluctuate to the extremes one side or the other really quickly and just like kind of go back to centering yourself in your own mind. So you're able to be you have the capacity to handle stressors in every single direction possible.
Right, right. Yeah, that's nice. Do you want to maybe start to move towards closing by talking about your book a little bit? You should tell us about, because I think you're writing a book, is that right?
Yeah.
Maybe tell us, where are you at with it? How far along are you?
So right now I'm not too focused on writing the book at the current moment because I'm
Okay,
more focused on trying to, do this startup that I can't really say too much more about right now.
sure.
But actually, they're kind of related because the nature of the startup is like how do we get the value out of ideas, right?
Okay.
And so that's kind of like the philosophical question, kind of driving the nature of the startup. And what I kind of want to do is like I don't just want to write some bullshit theoretical book about and just like pull up a whole bunch of studies. I want my actions to align with my philosophy. So I want basically what happens with a startup to kind of like be consistent, be like an actualization of what's gonna go inside the book.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. So basically with the book, I'm not really doing any active writing as of now, but I have probably hundreds of pages of notes and random drafts written up. And
Okay.
yeah.
Interesting.
But
So you're kind of
basically,
you're trying to take your ideas and test them out a little bit first.
right, exactly. So I'm trying to have something that's no bullshit and just like very pragmatic, yet also able to go as deep into the abstractions and the theories as possible as well. So kind of like that, going back to like the barbell investment strategy. So kind of try to have both sides of it.
Right. Nice. Dude, I mean, maybe what I need to draft a book proposal like in the form of like kind of like a business theory. Put it
Mhm.
on the internet and see if some startup founder wants to recruit me as a consultant or a programmer or something like that. I might have to try out your path.
Yeah, I mean, it can't hurt to just give it a shot.
Yeah. So what is your plan for the book? It's just open timeline, no particular deadlines you're setting for yourself or anything. Just when you get to it, you'll get to it.
There should be a deadline eventually. Just I don't have one in mind yet, but there definitely will be one. Like as soon as we clear up some other things, maybe like I want to have something more polished. Let's say in like a year.
Nice, nice, good. Well, you heard it. Heard it here first, folks. Maybe when you're done with the book, you can come back on the my YouTube channel. We can talk about that too.
Yeah.
Um, Cool. Well, yeah, I'm a big fan of your Twitter account, and this was fun to get to know you a little bit. Oh, someone asked, by the way, are you from? I think I saw from your blog. Are you Chinese? Are you?
Yeah.
That's right. So were you born and raised there?
I was born there, but I've been like American citizen since pretty much first year of college.
Okay, right on. Yeah, someone in the chat was just curious. Are there any other kind of let's see, maybe how should I put this? Are there any big ideas that you think uh people who watch my channel would be interested to know that they don't already know, that you'd be keen to share before parting with us?
Uh, I think I mostly shared what I wanted to share today, but I would probably recommend to try to get Daryl of Martyr Made on the show, and also like our other mutual friend, Michael Kamens.
Okay. I don't know if I don't know if they ring a bell to me, but
Yeah.
you said we're mutual friends. Michael, who is it?
Uh, so, so my mutual friend was Daryl of Martyr Made. Michael Kamens. Like we had a pretty interesting conversation on the Future Fossils podcast. I don't know if you're familiar with that one.
I've seen him around. Yeah.
Yeah. So we had a pretty interesting discussion there, and yeah, like I think Kamens stole the show on that one. So he's definitely a very interesting guy because like him and Ebert, they're the main ones developing philosophy.
Oh, sorry, you broke up a minute.
Yeah.
They're developing what was that? Did you say?
The hypermodernity philosophy.
Okay. Could you tell us real quick what that is?
Um, so Ebert, I think Ebert already kind of went into a little bit when he had that discussion with you. Like hypermodernity is like the time frame that happened basically after 9/11 or so, or actually even a little bit before then. It's like this changing the culture,
Okay, right,
past
right.
postmodernism.
Right. Yeah, I never remember anything.
Right. Yeah.
I don't remember it unless I'm like I need to read it multiple times and I need to write about it and then I develop memories. But other than that, stuff goes in one ear out the other sometimes. It's a shame. Okay, yeah. Well, thanks for those tips. I'll look into them for sure. I mean, I'm always like open to meeting new people, and I'm sure I've seen them around. Their ideas don't or their names don't immediately jump out of my mind, but I'm sure I've seen them around. And I'm always open to tips. So yeah, thanks for that.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
Yeah.
this has been fun. Yeah. There's no need to draw it out any longer than we need to. I think we covered a lot of ground, and I have a better sense of your ideas and what you're all about and stuff. And also, we can easily just do this again anytime if you want.
Yeah. It was a pleasure to talk to you. Let's talk again sometime.
Yeah, thanks, Q. Good to know you, and this was fun. And I'll be in touch with you, man. Thanks again.
Yeah. All right.
All right, cool. Take it easy.
Yep. You too.